Hello and welcome to the Irish in the Bell Show. My name is Shane Brennan. Thank you very much for joining us. And I know that if you were like me, that the second that the Super Bowl ended, you were already planning in the calendar as to where you might be going to watch some NFL football in the year 2026. You might be going over to America. We know the fact that NFL isn't coming to Ireland, but it is going to be coming to the UK. And today we're going to be chatting about the news which has just been released. We now have the designated home teams for all three London games, as well as yesterday the announcement that the Detroit Lions will be playing in Munich. We'll touch on that in a second. But the headline news is we're going to have Jacksonville Jaguars playing Wembley, and the two Tottenham home teams are going to be the Washington Commanders and the Jacksonville Jaguars. So they will be playing twice. We know the Jags have very much cemented themselves as being London's team. Unusual this year that in a year where they only have 8 instead of 9 home games, they're bringing 2 to London. But we can talk about that, the fact that there's some things happening in their stadium and everything. But from our point of view, Brian O'Leary, thank you very much for joining me. I definitely think this would be a fun thing because we've seen the Jags come over so much, and people will say, maybe that's not very interesting when the Jags keep coming over. But look at the style of football they played at the tail end of last year. And by the time they come over to London, they'll be a very, very key part of the season. I think this makes it for some pretty interesting matchups on that side of things.
Yeah, Shane, I agree with you. Like in the past, we would have had a situation where people were saying, the Jaguars are coming over to play in London twice, which has happened in the past. They played as a road team in Tottenham a couple of years back against the Bills and then followed up with a Wembley game. And people at the time were kind of suggesting, do I really have to go and watch the Jacksonville Jaguars twice? But this is a very different dynamic now. This is the Jacksonville Jaguars team that were really good and compelling last year in terms of the storyline. It started in the offseason with a bit of tongue-in-cheek around the head coach and how he delivered his opening press conference. But let's be fair, he delivered a great team over the course of the season. They rebounded very well, and they were very unfortunate not to win that wildcard game against the Bills. And, in some ways, you wish they had won because you would have liked to see how well they could have delivered in the divisional round. I'm always cautious about when we get this news so early in the off season because you'd never know what kind of NFL season we're going to experience. As you know well, I haven't seen your team, win only 4 games last year and go to the Super Bowl. But all things equal, the Jags look like they're building something nice there. And I like the idea of them coming over in terms of playing a home game in Tottenham because, okay, they've signed into this Wembley agreement for quite some time and they've always been kind of earmarked as the team that hosts in Wembley. It's going to be a different dynamic to see them in Tottenham. I'll see what kind of fan base they bring out because we're used to them playing in Wembley. We're used to a great fan base in Wembley. Now it's going to be interesting to see what they do at Tottenham.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely brings something different as to what the Jaguars experience in London is like, because that is, I think, a very key part to NFL history in Europe is the connection between Jacksonville and London. Look, as I was mentioning earlier, it's probably slightly unusual to see the Jags bring 2 home games this side of the Atlantic, considering it's not an AFC home year, but there's some stadium redevelopment going on. We could probably expect to see the Jaguars coming across the Atlantic, not necessarily always to London, a lot over the next couple of seasons. But what I find interesting about this is just the quality that we're going to see on the field. I mean, look, I think there's probably still a bit of a sour taste in some people's mouths after the way that they didn't really show up against the Los Angeles Rams last year. But in most other seasons when the Jags come to London, they've either played a good game or it's been a turning point after a slow start. I think that the way that this team is set up now, it's set up to carry momentum that I had in the tail end of last year. We're not quite sure what kind of free agency moves are going to make. Of course, we're still far out to really knowing what way the roster is going to be constructed. But Trevor Lawrence seems like he has the full confidence of Liam Cohen, which he didn't have last year when they played against the Rams. That's going to affect the product on the field we're going to get in both of those games. I think it's an interesting experiment to try and see, move the home buzz from one ground to the other. But I still definitely think we can see 2 sold-out games as we quite often get in London. I think Tottenham is just a fantastic stadium. It'd be interesting, I think, from the Jags' point of view, they might be testing out as to where their future London home will be post the building of the rebuilding of the stadium in Jacksonville. Maybe they might want to play more games in Tottenham because they like the experience there of playing instead of Wembley, which I would certainly be in favour of. I think Tottenham is one of the best stadium in the NFL in terms of the actual infrastructure around it. I think it's a fantastic venue. But let's just go through some possible opponents, and this might get people interested. Look, we don't usually see divisional matchups being taken out of home countries. Now, we are seeing it in Australia when the Rams are playing against the 49ers. We've seen the Jags take divisional opponents to London before. I can remember a game they played against the Texans and the Colts in recent years. But then, so let's not just work on the assumption that they will not be playing divisional games in London, even though a game against the Texans or the Colts would have huge ramifications for the AFC South. But their other opponents are the Patriots, the Eagles, the Steelers, the Commanders, who we know are also playing in London. We'll get out to that, and the Browns. I definitely think any of those games will be a really, really good clash. The Patriots, we know, coming in as AFC champions. The Eagles would be a very, very good game. The Steelers we saw play in Dublin last year. Like, this is, whatever way this turns out, I don't think this is a bad game in that mix.
No, I think we're very fortunate. You look at the road teams coming, you're obviously trying to do a process of elimination who you believe could be a realistic option. I would suggest maybe the Steelers are out of the picture because they played here last year. The Patriots will be an interesting dynamic. You know, there's a huge contingent of Patriots fans over here. Would a Jags-Patriots game be kind of mouth-watering, bearing in mind the season which both teams have had in Tottenham? I think that would make for a great game. If the Eagles come, I mean, the Eagles have a huge fan base across the UK, Ireland and Europe. They would bring out their fans in their droves to enjoy that game. We're only a year removed from when they last won a Super Bowl. People will get to see Saquon Barkley potentially come back and play in Tottenham, having played there when he was with his former team, the New York Giants. I think there's loads of little storylines and avenues that you could explore here as to why this would be a really great game. I mean, there's a lot of speculation, and I say speculation because nothing is confirmed, that the Browns are suggested as a team that could potentially play in Paris. Do we see a scenario, depending on the scheduling, where they play in Paris, then play in London, or vice versa? Because we're only a year removed from the Vikings played in Dublin in week 4 in Croke Park, and then went to London immediately and played week 5 and came out the right side of winning that particular game against the Cleveland Browns. So again, there's a lot of permutations there. I think what you've nailed there, Shane, is no matter what the circumstances are, I think we're in for a treat. We're in for a great game.
Yeah, I know on that list I had the Commanders as also a potential opponent for the Jags to host in London. I don't think that they're going to do a double-double where the Commanders would then play a home game and an away game against the Jags, who are also doing a double in London. But let's talk about the Commanders. I mean, you were there when they played against the Miami Dolphins in Madrid. I think it's fair to say that we could probably expect a better on-field product, because that game came at a point of the season when the season was kind of dead for Washington. A lot of the non-London international games come in November, which is a very different time of year to play football. London games always come earlier in the year when there isn't really any team that's dead yet. So we'll probably get to see something better from the Commanders. Dan Quinn obviously taking better control. We could probably see Jaden Daniels kick on. Just to mention briefly, potential opponents for them to face against, divisional opponents, as well as the Seahawks, the Rams, the Texans, the Colts, the Bengals, and the Falcons. There is some speculation the Falcons are interested in playing an international game this year as a road team. That's been something that's been talked about, but we don't have any concrete information on that yet. Any of those other games, I think, would also be a very, very intriguing matchup, certainly. Especially considering the 2 AFC South teams there, and they could potentially do a double over to London. Who knows? There's so many different permutations to what way the schedule makers could work this. But in terms of what we can expect from the Commanders, I think they're still a well-followed franchise, and looking forward to seeing them on our side of the Atlantic.
Yeah, they're a bit of an unknown, Shane. Like, we didn't see enough from them last year. You refer to the fact that they played in Madrid in late November against the Miami Dolphins team. Both sides essentially, their season was over. They were playing for nothing but pride. And I mean, they gave a good account of themselves. They probably should have won that game. I think a lot of Commanders fans will look at last season as one that just got away from them. Injuries very early on. Jaden Daniels, who, in fairness, Kieran Boyle is continuously called out in terms of his frame. It was announced that he would get injured at some stage, but he was out for large parts of the season. They'll look to get him back fully fit next season. There's a lot of change there. We've seen this morning that Zach Ertz has been released. So there's going to be a lot of changes in the offing there. Free agency is fast approaching. I think we'll see a very different Commanders team come to London. I think it's striking as well that we're now in a situation where just because a team played internationally the previous year doesn't eliminate them from coming back. Commanders played in Madrid. They're now going to host in Tottenham. You suggested, again, speculation that the Falcons are putting themselves in the mix to come and play in London again, having played in Berlin last year as the road team against the Indianapolis Colts. So one should not assume because the team played internationally last year that they won't be in the pecking order to come back again. I think if we did get a Commanders Falcons game, it kind of reminded me of that big Sunday night football game we got late December last year when Michael Penix got his first game as the Falcons quarterback. And it was a huge game for both teams in terms of the playoff permutations. And I think it went to overtime. Commanders came out the right side of it. That was a treat for a late game in the season when so much was on the line. As you said, there'll be a lot on the line come that game in late October, mid-October, because it's still very early in the season. Teams will still be feeling themselves out. I think we we'll be in for a treat no matter what we get. But there's a lot of permutations again as to why we should be fortunate to see a good Commanders team come over, and a lot of different teams there that could be compelling. Then I know some Bengals fans today have said, "Can we get a repeat of that game that was in Wembley years ago, which went to overtime?" And I don't even believe we had a winner. It went all the way to the very end. There was no winner, and that was a Redskins at the time. They were Commanders against the Falcons. I think if we got a game like that again, we'd be all very happy.
Yeah, I think Craig Rigdon was at that game, and he keeps talking about how really fun that was. And it'd be funny if it was the Commanders against the Falcons. Could it be a bit of a Dan Quinn revenge game? That's definitely an interesting storyline for us to dig into there. Let's turn to a city you've been to twice, Brian. A city I've never been to, but you are a diehard in terms of your love of the Munich game. You love the city, you love the stadium, you love what it brings. The Detroit Lions were announced yesterday as being the team who will be the designated home team for that one. I kind of saw that one coming because the Lions had a big sort of put a lot into the Berlin game when I was over there, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, obviously somebody whose mother is German. There's connections there to the building on. He was around for a lot of the NFL international events that were held in San Francisco a couple of weeks just gone. But I mean, after having the last game that Munich was thrown specifically was Panthers Giants. Like, the idea of the Detroit Lions coming into town, it's just an amazing, amazing prospect. That's going to be so fun. And I already know for a fact you've booked your flights. I know you're heading straight over there. Then when we have a meeting and try to figure out who's going to what one, you're like, Munich O'Leary is on that one.
Oh, I've already put my Puppin's word in the ring, saying, like, with the exception of the Dublin game, Munich is the best trip. It absolutely is. Anyone who hasn't experienced the Munich factor, has to go and explore Munich, enjoy the atmosphere, enjoy the city, everything that it embraces. My niece lives in Munich. We're back and forth there for quite some time. She doesn't seem like she's in any hurry to come home because it's just a fantastic place. I know the NFL, in Germany, have explored numerous cities now. Okay, they went to Munich initially. They had that great Seahawks Bucks game. They went to Frankfurt back-to-back weeks, and they went back to Munich. And they went to Berlin last year. So I think the NFL, and again, we don't know anything in particular, this is just our general thoughts and opinions, they've consumed as many other cities as they feel they can as part of the Germany program, but yet they've gone back to Munich. And I don't think it's just 1 year. I think this is
I think the way the German games work now is they're going to alternate between Berlin and Munich for the next couple of years. I think that I'm very sure that's signed in. So it'll be Munich this year, Berlin next year, and then back to Munich.
Okay, I thought it was a Munich 2-year factor. But anyway, to the point, it's, for me, I didn't experience Berlin, but I have been to Berlin separately for other sporting events. Munich gives every fan the opportunity to embrace the city, enjoy the opportunity to go. And it feels like, I'm not going to say it's like a party city, but everything is all kind of earmarked into a particular area around the German city centre, which allows for fans to get around. There's numerous NFL events on, as there was in Berlin and Frankfurt, but they're all very reachable. You can walk within distance to most of these events. The stadium isn't too far out. It's a fantastic stadium, whether you're there for football, whether you're there for the NFL. And there's something about how they put the game on in Munich, for me, is just, it's beyond any other games internationally. And I even throw Tottenham into the mix. There is speculation as well, Shane. You talked about the last time it was in Munich, and it was a very poor affair in terms of the Panthers hosting the New York Giants. But there's a lot of speculation that it could be the Giants again as the road team. A lot of us expected the Giants next year on the John Harbaugh, but we could see a Giants Lions game, and if it was to live up to the billing in which we saw there during the season, where James Winston was going off, throwing touchdowns here, there, and everywhere, and we got a high-scoring, explosive game, I think everybody would be delighted. I've looked at the Lions schedule in terms of what they've got as home opponents this year. I think we'll be in for a compelling affair. I would expect the Lions to be bouncing back next season. I'm not necessarily saying they're going to go and win the division, the NFC North, in terms of how the Bears and the Packers have played this year, but they'll be ruining a lost season for them on Dan Campbell. I think they'll embrace the German experience, and two, they'll be back challenging for the division again next season.
Dan Campbell versus John Harbaugh in Munich would just be the most incredible coaching philosophy matchup.
Box office, Shane. Box office.
John Harbaugh. Can I quote that now? Can I trademark that now? Harbaugh. Does that work? I feel like
it sounds like you're reevaluating and you want to be on the Munich love train. I get it.
Oh no, I definitely do. It's a city I haven't been to. I really like the Berlin experience, even though I didn't necessarily like Berlin is a city is a bit quirky, but the NFL aspect of having it there and the way the German sports fans set up, I agree with you. It's second only to Ireland in terms of how they set up for these events. And based on everything I've heard about Munich, it is fantastic. Even if you weren't at the game, you were just in the city when it was on. It just sounds like a fantastic thing. So one last thing I'm going to touch on briefly is, as we're recording, the one European game that we don't know anything about in terms of teams is the Madrid game. We know there is going to be a game in Madrid in the Bernabeu. You were in the Bernabeu last year, Brian. However, I'm not reading the tea leaves here too much, but I'm going to read the tea leaves. And it's going to be an NFC home game. That's we can pretty much assume that. The only NFC team that has international marketing rights are the Chicago Bears. I've had conversations with Spanish friends and journalists believing that the Bears have been a major presence in the Spanish market in the last couple of years. Let's be fair about this. After last year's game, they kind of needed Galactico, and the way that they're playing right now is Galactico football. And then every team announced who their international fan of the year was. Do you want to guess what country the Chicago Bear international fan of the year was from?
I don't have to guess, Shane. I'm well aware of it, and I'm well aware where you're going with this in terms of you're trying to talk this into existence that the Chicago Bears will be the host team in Madrid. That's a conflict for me now, because I'd love to see the Bears play in Madrid again. Gone to Madrid there in November, first ever NFL game, and the game itself wasn't great, but the experience of being to the Bernabeu, the new Bernabeu, having been to the old one for a football game, was second to none. The facilities are unbelievable. It's a great city, close proximity to everything you want to experience on a weekend away, or whether it's even on a day trip for an NFL game. So it doesn't come as a surprise that the NFL have latched on and gone back again. And if it is to be the Bears, again, we're assuming this Bears team are going to come back and be challenging again, like we saw this season, which was a great storyline on the Ben Johnson, Kaylee Williams, and everything that comes with that. So it does make a lot of sense, and you put out all the factors and all the points as to why it should be the Chicago Bears. So maybe it won't come as a surprise when it is announced, and we just don't know right now when that announcement is coming.
I'm not going off any actual information, by the way. This is very much a sort of like reading the way winds are blowing. So that's what I expect. But in terms of manifesting, I'm not necessarily manifesting Chicago. I am manifesting Chicago playing against New England, which is on the cards if that happens, in terms of like the actual matchups. That's the real Galactico matchup you want for Florentino Perez and co. Bring Drake May over. You know, it could be Drake Madrid. Come on, let's try to find a way to make it happen. That's what I really want.
The winds are blowing. The winds are blowing, and yet you're trying to explore the windy city team to come and play in Madrid.
See, Brian, that's why you make the money. That's why you get to pay to go on the Munich trips. You know, it's the lines like that. You just throw it in. It's a little bit of sauce, right? I think that does for this international news round. There'll be plenty more to come. We will still be building up towards our draft coverage, and then of course free agency will be kicking into gear as well. For now, thank you very much for listening to the Irish NFL Show.